Always the Servant, an original short story by Jared I. McGee. Really? Really? Did he always have to be on the rough end of these adventures? No, these were not adventures. This was work, plain and simple. Caiaphas had sworn to him that this whole shebang was a done deal, and that he would be on the right side of the bill collectors, the right side of the high priests, the right side of the Romans, the right side of history, and the right side of God himself, if he took part in this little formality. That's what he called it. Can you imagine? Caiaphas was nothing if not confident in his knowledge of the law, and he had repeatedly told Malchus that this false prophet and his bedraggled followers were heretics, both to the high council and to Yahweh, the Most Holy. This was a done deal. An easy job, Malchus, Caiaphas had said to him as they gathered just outside the temple. They didn't don their nicest robes. They all knew there would be some sort of physical confrontation if everything went to plan. And it had to. For this all to work, the Jews had to apprehend the false Messiah and give him over to the Romans for the legal crossed T's and dotted I's to ensure that this self-proclaimed Christ, even thinking it made the bile rise in his throat, was imprisoned, exiled out of the empire, or, in the best scenario, crucified for these crimes against the Jewish people and his affronts to their God. They were praying. Damn. Here Malchus was reveling in his own thoughts of revulsion at this man, and he himself was neglecting this quick commune with their Creator to ask for blessings as they set out on this crucial journey. Once they actually began walking, it was a very quick jaunt to the garden. Halfway to their destination, they were joined by one of the dogs that had served this monster. Malchus scoffed at this beady-eyed little man that looked so terrified and crushingly weary. He couldn't celebrate what this man was doing, if for no other reason than this sort of betrayal was an act of cowardice that constituted a mortal sin in and of itself. They strode confidently into Gethsemane, all shadows and the clinking of swords, the thick thumping of staves as they jostled toward their prey. They couldn't help but make noise in this darkest of nights. He got a chill as an errant thought that this darkness might be something unnatural. No, that's just the imagination. The long hours. Only 4 men stood there before them. Which was the deluded shepherd of men, as he was called? The bedraggled former accountant solved this riddle for Malchus and the rest of the band, stepping forward to kiss his rabbi on the cheek. The man he kissed was unremarkable. Simple clothes, a close-cropped beard, long matted hair. This was no king of kings and ruler of the chosen people. How could he even begin to delude himself, much less others, into following him?
Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss?
The man asked his former disciple. Judas. That was the coward's name. The false Messiah would have done less damage had he struck out at the man. When those words fell upon Judas, he appeared to shrink even more within himself, the shadows clinging to him in an unnatural way. No, that was just a trick of the light, the stress getting the better of Malchus again. That would not do. He needed a clear head for this. The 3 disciples present of his remaining 11 took defensive postures around their Lord. All the enforcers and servants of the high priest took up corresponding defensive postures, mirroring their foes. These poor disciples were greatly outnumbered. Malchus made sure he was in the center of the formation. Too many times before in his life was he elbowed to the sidelines while others reaped glories and adulation that should have been his. One of the men shouted something. Malchus thought he'd heard a question from those ragged men to their ragged general, but he couldn't be certain. The question was lost, time slowed, steel flashed. A battle cry rang out, seemingly incongruent with the pace the sword was coming at him. He was struck down. Once, when he was a boy, Malchus's older brother had allowed him to go hunting with him. Malchus had been so excited. They were out for some small fowl, and watching his brother with a sling was a thing of excitement and beauty. His brother would let fly a stone. A bird would fall. Malchus would run as fast as he could to fetch it, bringing it back to his brother, proud that he could be of help. His brother would ruffle his hair and let him know that he'd done a good job. For Malchus, this was the only real affection he'd ever known. Despite the excitement, Malchus allowed himself to become distracted. He thought he heard his brother's sling whir in the air and stop. On reflex, he sprinted out to where he thought the bird would be falling. His brother shouted for him, but it was too late. Malchus was struck with his brother's deadly stone. He almost died from that bit of daydreaming. That memory is what flashed in his mind's eye as a similar pain erupted on the right side of his head. He tumbled down, thinking of how sad it was that he would die here in Gethsemane. The place was beautiful, but not right now. The darkness was too thick. This job had a taint to it that didn't sit right with Malchus. He should have known better. The fringe acolytes of this man had killed him. He didn't feel the ground when he landed on it, after he stumbled hard to the left from the blow dealt him by one of the more wild-eyed disciples. He blinked red and tasted iron. He thought again of his brother, and happier, simpler times. Then, to his surprise, he was helped back up. Just as he was about to be thankful to his comrades in arms, he realized it was this would-be Messiah lifting him up, saying to his disciple,
Peter, please, put up thy sword into the sheath. Suffer ye thus far with me. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink it?
Most of that was gibberish, but Malchus was relieved to hear the man put his weapon away. Maybe Malchus wouldn't die tonight after all. His severed ear lay on the ground, though, and he was losing blood at an alarming rate. Even if he made it to a doctor back in the city in time, he might have lost too much blood, or already have infection setting in. He looked up into the man's eyes. The depths of kindness in that warm mahogany brown was inhuman. Malchus shivered. He knew, in that moment, that this man was of God. Maybe he was God, just as he'd claimed. The man did not say anything to Malchus. He simply smiled, bent down, picked up the severed ear, and put it over the hole that was thrumming with pain and blood. The slightest warmth followed his touch, and then Malchus felt no pain. The pain hadn't just left his ear, his head, his bruised left side. He felt like he'd never experienced a bump, break, cut, or so much as a minor scrape in his entire life. He felt new. Tears welled up in Malchus's eyes and began to fall unbidden. Here he was in the garden to arrest, if not kill, this man, and he found himself holding the hems of his robes and weeping, stroking the man's arms. His colleagues were all frozen. No one, save Caiaphas, so much as breathed. He, on the other hand, was enraged and shouting vile things at this man and his followers that were only being held back by this man's word. Caiaphas began to shake each of Malchus's comrades to jolt them back into the present and toward the mission at hand. Rather than have an all-out battle begin, which certainly is what would have happened, this healer put his hand up and mentioned something about drinking from a cup that his dad gave him again, which still sounded strange to Malchus. At any rate, his men backed down just as Caiaphas' men were regaining their composure. The 3 loyalists to the would-be priests let the arrest take place after that, scattering in all directions in the hubbub of the arrest itself, and in the whooping of Caiaphas and his comrades. The prisoner himself only walked and was ever peaceful. On the way back to Caiaphas and the priest's headquarters, Malchus touched his ear. Many times. He could not believe that this was possible. All this talk of putting down a false messiah, and this ragtag shepherd of freaks and misfits had done the impossible with but a touch. As they delivered this man, this Jesus, to his cell, and Caiaphas put the guards of the buildings on high alert, Malchus could not help but think, maybe, just maybe, they had this one wrong. Thank you for listening to Always the Servant. The backing track was taken from the Free Music Archive. It is titled Raggedy Bob and comes from Ben McElroy's album of the same name. It is being used under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. I hope that you have enjoyed yet another new take on a classic tale. Now, on to our last tale of the week.